you were an asthmatic kid, and I was wondering what drew you to sports, being asthmatic as a youngster.
You know, I played tennis, and I was playing tennis at the same time as I was getting asthmatic attacks living in Florida in the winters and in Long Island in the summers. And I think it was one of the ways of compensating, you know, trying to get some semblance of athleticism and physicality into my life. And I was a kind of naturally gifted tennis player, so I persevered, even though the truth is that I was always kind of fighting against it. That's why I was startled to hear from Mike in the movie, because I hadn't known it, even though I'd known him for 24 years, that he had these breathing problems when he was a kid.
Right.
One doesn't usually think of him as physically limited or fragile.
Mm-hmm. And when you were in the midst of the documentary process of this film, when did it occur to you that Mike Tyson fell in line with the protagonist of your other films?
Well, it actually occurred to me when I met him when he was 19.
Okay.
And I thought, this guy has so much, despite ostensible dissimilarities, he has so much that is connected to the characters I'm writing and the way I'm writing them that I could easily use him in a film. And it didn't seem like a practical thing at the moment because he was just about to become heavyweight champion, but it actually did occur to me that down the road that'd be a real possibility.
Mm-hmm. And, I remember an interview you once did with Elvis Mitchell, and you made mention of your lead characters not having much time left after the movie was over. And
not doing what?
Not having much time. You know, once the movie was over, they would probably be gone in a few days or a few weeks or so forth.
Right.
And I'm curious, in regards to Tyson, is Mike surprised that he's past the age of 40, and are you surprised?
Well, he says in the movie, can't believe you reached 40.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's probably ongoingly surprised with each new year.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly didn't, when I first got to know him, didn't expect him to live a long life, long being defined in his terms, not in conventional ones. And I've actually reached the age myself of 64, which is utterly insane, given that when I was 22, 23, I was promising everybody I was going to be dead at 26. And actually, when I hit my 27th birthday, was almost embarrassed because I thought, how do I explain this to everybody that I've been telling I was going to be dead at 26? Now that I'm old enough to be my own grandfather at 26, there's something almost comical about it.
Right. Well, would you say that, I would think that starting with two girls and a guy, that your protagonist kind of started to reflect this kind of cautious optimism of possibly living longer than they might have expected.
That was the only movie which I have to say I felt almost guilty about ending with what I secretly considered to be artificially constructed hopefulness. In fact, when I look at my back on my movies, that's the one that strikes me as having an egregious false note at the ending, because it really does imply that they're going to have a kind of cheerful future. And even though I'm always optimistic on some fundamental level, I secretly believe that wishful thinking, and that as what George Cukor used to call a bad end is always around the corner. In fact, that was whenever anybody would come up with conversation, somehow Cukor would end up saying he's going to come to a bad end, or he came to a bad end. And I finally said to him one day, why not just assume that everyone is going to come to a bad end, and then you don't have to bother saying it.
Well, at the end of the movie, Tyson, you dedicate it to your mother, and you've written probably some of the most independent-minded women in the movies. Is there a connection between the impact of your mother and the way you write women roles?
If there is, and I'm sure there is, it probably, despite 3 years of psychoanalysis, eludes me, at least consciously. But I do clearly, I feel that she, was the seminal influence in my life in every way, and that everything that has happened in my life in some way revolves around the relationship that I had with her. And I look at her absence, as that quote implies, as a kind of ongoing, haunting reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the need to feel her presence is sort of it's just always there with me. I kind of what's the right way to put it? I look at everything else as a sort of unreal approximation of that relationship. And in fact, one of the things that I think has been at work since she died is that my own mortality, which, as I say, has always been an ongoing, has had an ongoing imminence in my mind, however long that's been. I feel that that it's 10 times truer,
mm-hmm.
and the absurdity of being alive is an ongoing conscious awareness, which I only eliminate to a degree when I'm making a movie, because
right.
I'm thinking, well, this is a specific task at hand, and I regard it as a sort of mission. So, I can actually say, well, why don't I suspend my sense of imminent mortality, even though I have not all that much control over it, for a while, until this next movie is over. And then, of course, I always hope there'll be another movie which comes to replace it in my mind, and that movie will suffice to justify continued existence.
Right. And to kind of sort of continue in that vein of the strong woman possibility, I got to ask, I'll ask my last question, that because I became obsessed when I heard about this biopic you've always wanted to do, and I was kind of wondering, is there any status on your Victoria Woodhull?
Well, the status is that I definitely want to do it, and the question is, who's going to finance it? I mean, the word is that it's going to be ongoingly difficult, and certainly that's been the case over the years. I think I'm going to have to get lucky. If it gets financed, which I hope it will, it'll almost be a fluke, because that is so out of step with what's being done without a real struggle. And that was true even before this economic reality came about, but certainly is truer now. And I think that the chances of its improving are slender, simply because it validates the view that movie executives have anyway, which is that it's safest to make movies for 12-year-old boys, and anything else is risky.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to hang in. I'm actually actively trying to find a way of doing it right now. I don't know in a second, but certainly over the next couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Toback, this is Jamie. I just have I just have a couple of questions for you, and then I'll hand it over to Jerry for a couple more, and we'll let you off the hook. One of the things that I find so fascinating and endearing about you, and I guess it speaks to why you are a filmmaker, is how upfront and open you are about your demons and your ailments and so forth. And in drawing parallels between yourself and Tyson, I can see where Tyson would channel all that energy in the ring. And I'm wondering, is that this is? And you talked about this earlier. If you could expand upon it a little bit, is filmmaking that for you?
It's definitely a way of obviously not forgetting, but it's a way of sublimating the obsession with mortality, or of putting it on hold for a moment. And it's not a conscious act, but it definitely is. Anything that is absorbing, by definition, is taking hold of the mind for the moment, and that's about the only thing that succeeds that way with me.
And you mentioned psychoanalysis earlier, and there's a kind of famous quote from David Lynch on this subject where he went to a shrink and he asked the shrink, "Will this affect my creativity?" And the shrink said, "Yes, it very well could." And so then he walked out because he didn't want to have any part of it. Is that a fear of yours that somehow that could have an effect?
I think that when I was in it, I was so resistant to its working on the level that the analyst wanted it to work on, that it never occurred to me that it would actually be a problem in that regard. That is to say, I didn't look at it as therapeutic or as geared to changing my life, which of course is what he did, and in changing my behavior. I looked at it as a way of getting to know myself better and finding things out that fascinated me about myself.
Yeah.
And of course, we had an ongoing problem as a result. There was a clash of wills consistently over that difference of opinion and goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me turn you over to Jerry, and he'll come up with a couple of quick questions for you, and then we'll let you go. Jerry, you're on.
Okay, great, Mr. Toback. It is a great honor to be with you today. I just got back from a screening of Tyson, and I will let you know it was packed, and the reaction was very favorable. I have to ask you, though. That while watching the film, I couldn't get it out of my mind of some of your other protagonists in your films and how much Tyson has in common with them, especially in Harvey Keitel and The Fingers and James Caan and The Gambler. And if Mike Tyson never existed, you would have had to invent him. Do you agree with that?
Quite possibly. He seems to be the sort of culmination of and fruition of a number of characters that I've written about over the years, and certainly feels in a way almost to be a fictional creation, as indeed I many times think I am a fictional creation of myself, or that I'm this ongoing, day-by-day created character who has an actual physical reality, but who seems to exist in some way outside the realm of reality. And it's as if I'm saying on some level, now what do I do with this person today? And I'm sort of complicit in his ongoing formation of identity, but there's somehow an unreality to it all, as there is to existence. I mean, if you think about how crazy it is that we're on this planet, and you look in particular at the Hubble telescope's discoveries, which, by the way, they're fixing the Hubble again to try to give it one last run now, and I have to say I hope they succeed, because a great deal of my awareness of not just what's out there, but what our relationship to what's out there is, comes from the Hubble.
Oh, I agree with you 100% with that. I agree 100%. That's fascinating stuff. Now, going back to Tyson, though, I am curious. Why didn't you present like any opposing sides, or did you think that Mike Tyson alone was more than enough? His viewpoint was more than enough for the film.
Yeah, it just struck me as superfluous.
Okay.
I mean, the idea that I would have a bunch of, well, I don't mean to be too offensive, but secondhand and ultimately lame opinions articulated just didn't interest me. I mean, to have Mike Tyson is one of the most fascinating talkers I've ever known in my life.
Oh, without a doubt, yeah.
And to take what I'm getting from him and, squeeze it down so I can fit in the sort of secondhand gossip of others,
right,
would have seemed to me a catastrophic waste of movie time.
And he kind of does that in a way too at various points. I feel he's sometimes. I mean, in the film, he comes across as his own worst enemy. So I think
he's certainly a very highly self-analytical and self-reflective guy. So you're constantly getting a sort of multifaceted view of him from him.
That's true, and I think that's the thing I want to bring up, because he is a very complex character, and I think your documentary is the first to really bring about this like multi-dimensional portrait of him, whereas everything before this has really sadly been a caricature.
Yes, that's definitely true.
I wanted to actually touch on the movie Fingers, and what was your reaction? And were you approached about the remake, the French remake, the Beat That My Heart Skipped?
I was approached, and it was more a formality about how to get rights, and then I had one meeting with, Jacques Audiard, the director.
Right.
And, I think he was just interested. He's a very kind of sly guy.
Right.
I think he was interested in getting my take and seeing how it fit into his notion, and seeing if there was anything I might say that would add to what he was planning. And I felt that he did a very interesting film. It was extremely well written.
Mm-hmm.
I also felt well directed as well.
Right.
I also felt that it was, to be blunt about it, the ending was quite disappointing because
was it too upbeat?
Yeah, because it beats at my heart skipped. I mean,
yeah.
The truth is that the movie has to end on a dark note. There is no way to do it honestly any other way. And of course, he gets away free at the end. And I also, just on a rational level, don't believe that that Russian gangster whom he beat would have allowed him to get away with that beating if he was allowed to survive, which he was. And I also didn't believe that he would hold a pistol to his face and start crying instead of killing him.
Right.
It's one extreme to the other.
Right.
But I mean, I actually thought it was quite a good film, except for that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I have one last question, and it's I just was curious how your Harvard education, your Ivy League days, have informed your filmmaking. And by that I mean also want to go one step further and say, what's a nice boy like you doing, fascinated by the underbelly of life?
Well, I don't know. I always have been.
Okay, that makes two of us. Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah. It goes back so far, and it's so deep rooted that it's hard to remember a time when it wasn't. It isn't like a conversion took place.
You were always fascinated by like this life that maybe that when you're growing up you read about and saw in films. Is it something like that? I mean, it was more immediate than that. You know,
okay. I grew up. I had in Atlantic Beach, which is where Long Island, where you had a country house. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of Jewish and Italian gangsters, and their kids, and I was quite friendly with many of them, and actually mixed in that world. So it had an immediate appeal to me. It wasn't just from a distance.
Mm-hmm.